I recently got the chance to watch The Substance, a 2024 body horror film directed by Coralie Fargeat, and I have some strong mixed opinions on it. On one hand, I found myself enthralled at the execution, the bold choices made, and how exhilarating and haunting it was at times. But there were also times where I found myself really nauseated. It got me really close to walking out of the screening on a couple of occasions. It's definitely the grossest thing I've seen in recent memory. In some ways, I really respect this film, and in other ways I find it really hurts its own premise. I know that sounds kind of hyperbolic and contradictory, but I think it's just one of those movies that you'll either love or hate. And for me, there are certain aspects that I really like and certain aspects that I really just did not care for. So stay tuned as I go into more details on this movie review. Also, just a heads up that I'll be going over some minor spoilers. I'll try to keep it as spoiler free as I reasonably can while still having enough to discuss this film. So this film stars aging actress Elizabeth Sparkle, played by Demi, who was an award-winning actress who has now fallen out of the spotlight and has been relegated to lower budget network television, with her career on the ropes from being seen as too old and no longer attractive to the public eye. In a feat of desperation, she discovers a mysterious serum which, when injected, will create a younger, more beautiful version of the user who acts as a body double. This body double, named Sue and played by Margaret Qualley, will go out and live her own life, and the two of them switch places every 7 days without exception. As time goes on, Elizabeth grows more reclusive as Sue gains more social recognition, eventually replacing Elizabeth as the host of her TV fitness show. As one can imagine, as this goes on, the 7-day balance between the two is eventually disrupted, and we're presented with the horrific consequences to abusing the serum. In a way, the plot themes of aging actress who falls out of the spotlight mirrors real life. The character in this film is originally referenced as that actress that was in King Kong, which is a reference to Fay Wray. She's an actress active in the 1930s who found success as lead actress in King Kong, known greatly for her sex appeal at the time, but within just 9 short years of that film ended up retiring from the stage. This idea is also present in the actress who portrays Elizabeth Sparkle, Demi. She herself was active in the 1980s, and during the 1990s was the highest paid actress at the time. But over time, she got fewer and fewer acting roles, and it's clear that this is a very personal role for her, and I applaud the vulnerability that takes to take on such a role. I can't really think of anyone more perfect for this role. Which is not to say that the other actors do a bad job. Margaret Qualley plays a younger version of Elizabeth named just Sue, and I love the frenetic energy that she brings to the table. I can't wait to see her get more deserved screen time in future films. Much like how this film has these two main actresses that contrast with each other, the film itself has these two different complementary styles. The first one is this kind of Stanley Kubrick art house film influence. So this film exists in a state of hyper-reality. There are multiple shots of impossibly long hallways, impossibly tall walls, and other structures that wouldn't exist in real life. And the color palette is kind of reminiscent of other Kubrick films, such as The Shining and 2001: A Space Odyssey. The sound design also exists in this state of hyper-reality, where everything is really dramatized and has this deep, booming quality to it. Overall, it creates this extremely polished feel that is stylized as well as really pristine and sterile, but not as all well under the surface. I think at times this style creates a deep sense of isolation. The environment feels suffocating and malicious and deeply isolating. I think at times it highlights kind of the superficiality of Los Angeles in the 1970s, with everything being an overly saturated, vibrant color that's also catered to the male gaze. The TV show that Sue and Elizabeth host is a fitness class mostly aimed at women, but it's essentially filmed in the same way that a porn would be filmed. And this film creates these villainous representations of the people who consume this content that challenges the viewer and asks them, how much are you a willing participant of this system by watching this? I think it's mostly brilliant, but I have two main issues. The first is how much of a stereotypical exaggeration is placed on these villainous male subjects. I think it's so over the top with its hyper-reality that it downplays how insidious and invisible the actual power structures and dynamics of these situations can be, which is something even scarier in my mind. and the second being that I think there are some viewers who may find the pacing of this style to be just a little bit slow. The film is rather methodical and really lingers on shots for a long while, so for the first half of this film, relatively little actually happens plot-wise. Now, the second and more notable aspect of this film is the David Cronenberg body horror style. Now, don't get me wrong, I think body horror as a metaphor for the process of aging can and does work. I think there are times when this idea of body horror is used quite effectively. One example that I really like is a scene where Demi Moore, resentful of Sue's newfound popularity and beauty, needs to find a new hobby to take on, and she learns recipes from this French cookbook. And the dish that she chooses to make is turkey stuffed with foie gras. On another more culinary themed film, like if this was Ratatouille or something, I think this could have easily been filmed to be something that looks really scrumptious, but the techniques used in this film make this thing look utterly disgusting. The soundtrack for these parts of the movie is what I can only describe as squelching, like it's really gross and unsettling. And you pair that with the extreme close-ups that show all of the viscera of human life in extreme detail, and in this case it really recontextualizes this act of cooking. Like it really breaks down this idea of like, wow, Demi Moore is taking this lifeless carcass of a creature and stuffing it with the artificially enlarged and fattened body organ of another creature, all for man's decadent consumption. Weird tangent, but it kind of reminds me of that one deli ham meat obelisk meme. I don't know if anyone knows what I'm talking about. The camera and sound techniques make you really realize, oh, this thing that we take for granted as this luxury product is actually really gross under the surface if you think about it. We love to eat the sausage, but we don't want to see how it gets made. I think that's kind of a metaphor for the entire film. Going back to the overly pristine Kubrick-inspired shots, we get to see the end result of the TV show that these characters produce, how it's this decadent product made for our greedy consumption, but we don't really think about the real-life abuse, suffering, and downright criminal activity that goes into making a product like this. So the film is a dichotomy of these two styles, the pristine and the gory, but here's where I think the movie goes a little bit too far and my main problem with the film. I think it's so gross to the point that it undermines its own message. I won't spoil the ending, but the last 30 minutes of this film were really difficult to stomach for me. I'm not exaggerating when I say that I saw this film at dinner time. I had skipped dinner while watching this. By the time I got home, it was like 10 p.m. and I hadn't eaten since noon, and I just ended up skipping dinner altogether. That's how disgusted I was by this. Which kinda sucks to say, because I know that the last 30 minutes is some people's favorite part of the film. Once again, I think it's one of those things that you either love or you hate. I won't cover anything that happens in this section since it would definitely be a spoiler, but for a little bit of a preview, like there's a section halfway through the film where Margaret Qualley rips open her belly button and pulls like a chicken drumstick out of her body. Trust me, it makes sense in the context of the film. And that's like maybe the 12th most disgusting thing that happens in the movie. Like it doesn't even break the top 10. I've already covered how disgusting body horror can work within the film to get the point across, but I think the film devolves into cheap shock value that the audience has no choice but to kind of laugh at. Not because seeing these women suffer is inherently funny or deserved, but because there's no other reaction to seeing something like so disgusting and horrific. One of the central ideas presented in this film and told to Demi Moore's character is that you are still valid and you still deserve dignity and respect. And I think it's a beautiful message, so I can't shake this uneasy feeling that we as an audience are made to laugh at this person that we are told deserves this dignity and respect. So I think at the end of the day, despite all the good things going for this film, all of the details and messages in the first 2/3, we as an audience will only really remember the emotional highlights and shocking moments that captured our attention. Unfortunately, because of that misstep in the end, I think I'll be giving this film a 7 out of 10. But hey, it's one of those things where if someone were to go up to me and they told me that they loved this film, I think I could understand why. I think it just wasn't for me. If you got the chance to see this film, let me know what you thought about it in the comments, and please subscribe if you want to see more movie reviews like this.